In the unforgiving silence of the desert, a wounded Apache woman whispered her final plea, "Please end my pain." But instead of pulling the trigger, a lonely farmer made a choice that would change both their lives forever. This is a story of unexpected mercy, fragile hope, and two souls fighting their way back from the edge of death. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, share this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's get started with this emotional Western tale. Her whisper was so faint that the desert wind nearly swallowed it, yet it struck him harder than any bullet ever could. "Please end my pain." John Hale froze, his hand trembling above the holster, but it wasn't fear that stopped him, it was the way she looked at him. The Apache woman lying in the dust wasn't angry, wasn't pleading for mercy, wasn't preparing to fight. She was simply done. Life had drained from her eyes long before he arrived. But something inside him refused to let that be her end. Not here, not like this. He had seen suffering before, the kind that breaks a person long before death touches them, but never like this. The moment he stepped closer, he felt the world around them narrow into silence. Her wounds told their own story, bruises, blood, torn skin, shattered strength. She had crawled through the desert alone, leaving a trail of agony behind her. John swallowed hard. Killing her would be easy, fast, almost merciful. But something about the way she stared into him, trusting a stranger with her final breath, made his hands grow cold. Slowly he knelt beside her, the dust rising around his boots. She winced, but her gaze didn't shift from his. He reached to examine her injuries and she flinched sharply, expecting cruelty. John's voice softened. "I'm not here to hurt you." She stuttered him, searching for lies, but her body was too weak to resist. Her breath shook as he lifted her arm. The wound in her side was deep, too deep for someone who had escaped alone. He knew this was no accident. Someone had hunted her, and she had barely survived. "Tell me what happened," he asked quietly, though he already feared the answer. Her voice cracked like dry branches. "Ambush, soldiers, my family ran, I could not." Her words broke off into a harsh cough, blood touching her lip. John wiped it quickly with the edge of his sleeve. She looked at him again, her eyes trembling. "Please, no more pain, just finish it. Let me go." He felt the weight of that request settle on his shoulders like a mountain, but he did not reach for his gun. He reached for her hand. "We're not dying here," he said firmly. "Not alone, not like this." For a moment she blinked, confused, as if she hadn't heard him clearly. "Help me." The word cracked open something inside him he had buried long ago, memories of loss, helplessness, and watching someone he loved slip away. He tightened his grip gently. "Yes, I'm going to save you." She stared at him in disbelief, her breath trembling, her strength fading even faster. He slipped his arms beneath her fragile body. She cried out in pain, but she didn't resist. She let herself fall into the arms of someone she didn't know. The journey back to his homestead felt longer than ever. Every step echoed with her faint breaths, sometimes steady, sometimes frighteningly slow. John kept glancing at her face, afraid he would see the last exhale. The sun was dipping lower, painting the desert in burning orange. He whispered to her even though she barely responded. "Stay awake. Stay with me, just a little longer." The mule moved gently beneath them, as if understanding the life it carried. John prayed silently, not something he'd done since his wife's death, but desperate times stripped a man of pride. When they reached his cabin, the familiar creak of the wooden door suddenly felt different. He carried her inside, her head falling against his chest. His dog barked in alarm, but he silenced him quickly. The house was small, barely more than a single room, but it was warm and safe. He laid her on his own bed, the only place clean enough for her wounds, her breathing hitched, shallow and uneven. John grabbed his medical supplies, simple tools, nothing fancy, and began working with shaky hands, knowing one wrong move could push her past the edge she'd been clinging to. He cleaned each wound slowly, carefully, wiping away layers of dried blood and sand. Every time he touched her injuries, she flinched, whispering something in Apache he didn't understand. But she didn't push him away. She let him help. When he removed the arrow splinter from her shoulder, she nearly fainted, her breath stopping for 2 terrifying seconds. John shook her lightly until she gasped again. "Don't you dare leave now," he whispered. "Not after coming this far." He wrapped the wound tightly with fresh cloth, his fingers trembling from the intensity of the moment. Hours passed, the night creeping in through the window. John didn't rest. He boiled water again and again, cleaned her cuts, changed bandages, pressed cool cloths to her forehead. At one point she opened her eyes halfway and stared at him, not with fear, not with confusion, but with something unfamiliar. Trust. Why do you help me?" she whispered. John's heart tightened. "Because someone should have helped you before now," he said softly. "Because you deserve a chance to live." She blinked slowly, fighting the weight of sleep. "No one helps us. No one." He didn't answer. He simply placed a gentle hand over hers, grounding her. The hours crawled by, and twice she stopped breathing long enough to make him panic. But each time he brought her back, refusing to let the desert take her. Near dawn, exhaustion finally caught him, his head dropping beside her bed. But the slightest movement from her, barely a shift in the sheets, pulled him awake instantly. She was alive. Fragile, bruised, broken, but alive. And in that moment, he realized something he hadn't admitted even to himself. Saving her wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a promise, a silent vow he intended to keep. When morning light slipped through the cracks of the wooden walls, Ahioka's eyes fluttered open. For the first time since he found her, her breaths came steadier, though still shallow. John sat beside her, the fatigue of the night etched into every line of his face. She studied him quietly, almost in disbelief that he was still there. In her world, trust was scarce, and kindness from outsiders was rarer still. "You stayed," she whispered. John nodded, brushing dust from his sleeve. "I said I wouldn't leave you, and I meant it." Her eyes softened with something unfamiliar. As days passed, Ahioka regained strength ounce by ounce. She learned to sit up without collapsing, then to stand with John's careful support. Her pride refused too much help, even when she stumbled. He never forced, never rushed her. He simply offered his arm when she needed it and stepped back when she didn't. In the evenings, they remained silent for long stretches, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just human. Ahioka would watch the sunset through the cabin window, her thoughts drifting to memories of her people, wondering if any of them still breathed. John noticed the way her gaze lingered toward the horizon, the longing carved into her expression. One night, as fire crackled softly between them, he spoke gently. "You're thinking about finding them, aren't you?" She nodded without looking at him. "They are my blood, my home. If even one is alive, I must return." John swallowed. He had known this moment would come. He had felt it building with every wound that healed, every breath she regained. Still, the thought of her leaving carved an ache beneath his ribs. "Then I'll help you find them," he said. Ahioka turned sharply, eyes wide. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Her voice was filled with genuine confusion. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because no one should walk alone into the unknown, and because you matter." She stared at him, studying his sincerity, trying to find the fault in it, but she found none. Slowly, she nodded, accepting his offer with a quiet respect. The next morning, they packed supplies and saddled the mule. Ahioka stood straighter than she had in weeks, strength returning to her step as they headed north. The journey was long and unforgiving. Days passed beneath scorching sun and cold desert nights. Ahioka found herself growing stronger with each mile, her wounds tightening but no longer bleeding. She taught John how to read trail signs, broken twigs, footprints shaped by moccasins, markings on trees that only her people understood. John listened closely, letting her lead when she could. At night, she told him stories of her childhood, river dances, hunting lessons, the songs her mother hummed by firelight. John, in turn, shared memories of his late wife, of the love he lost, and the emptiness that followed. Somewhere along that dusty road, their silence grew warmer. They no longer walked as strangers, but as two people bound by shared hardship. John found himself glancing at her when she wasn't looking, noticing the determination burning behind her eyes. Ahioka, despite her strength, often watched him too, the way he checked the horizon every few minutes, the way he placed himself between her and any danger, the way he spoke with quiet steadiness that made the world feel less cruel. Hope began to replace instinctive fear, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. On the 10th day, Ahioka suddenly stopped. She crouched low, touching the earth with trembling hands. John knelt beside her. "What is it?" She traced a faint footprint barely visible to his untrained eyes. "My people, they passed here not long ago." Her voice trembled with emotion. John felt a weight lift from his chest. They followed the tracks deeper into a canyon until thin smoke rose in the distance. Ahioka's breath caught. She quickened her pace, wounds aching but ignored. As they stepped into a clearing, figures turned sharply, Apache warriors, bows raising in an instant. John froze, palms open at his sides, ready for whatever came next. But Ahioka stepped forward, calling out in her native tongue. The warriors' expressions shifted from hostility to shock. Then joy erupted, a wave of voices crying her name. They rushed to her, touching her arms, her face, assuring themselves she was real. Ahioka broke into tears, clinging to her family. John stood back, relieved but suddenly painfully aware of the distance between worlds. Then the warriors noticed him. Suspicion sparked again, weapons rising, but Ahioka lifted her hand. "No, he saved me. He is why I live." The tension in the air eased. An elder approached John slowly, bowing his head. "You brought our daughter home. This is a debt we cannot repay." John nodded respectfully. "I didn't do it for a debt. I did it because she deserved a chance." They invited him to stay for the night. He sat near the fire as Ahioka reunited with her people, laughter and emotion filling the camp. But even surrounded by them, her eyes drifted toward John again and again. He pretended not to notice, but his heart felt every glance. Later, under sky thick with stars, Ahioka walked toward him. Her steps were slow, thoughtful. She lowered herself beside him, the firelight casting warm shadows on her face. "You brought me back to life," she said softly. "You gave me something I had lost, hope." He tried to smile, though it came out sadder than he intended. "I'm glad you're home, Ahioka." She studied him for a long moment. "And what of you? Will you return to your empty house, your empty nights?" John looked down at his hands, unable to hide the truth. Ahioka reached out, her fingers brushing his gently. "If you ever choose to come back, you will not walk alone." Her words hit him like the first breath after drowning, unexpected, overwhelming, life-giving. John met her eyes, seeing not a wounded stranger, but a woman of fierce spirit, deep loyalty, and quiet strength. "I'd like that," he whispered. The fire crackled softly between them, but the space no longer felt wide. For the first time in years, John felt the possibility of a new path, one woven with healing instead of loss. He looked at Ahioka, and she looked back with the same unspoken understanding. Two lives once broken by pain had found connection in the harshest desert, and in that fragile, beautiful moment beneath the stars, they discovered that sometimes the past doesn't define the future, kindness does. Love does. And the simple choice to save a life instead of ending it can change everything forever.